Have I come to this planet to pay bills?
Leaders are not born, they are made.
So I want to meet you for half an hour. How much will you charge? Everyone will be buying and selling time.
विश्व में केवल 10% ऐसे लोग हैं जो गोल सेट करते हैं.
The manager converted into a leader and you said, we all know, let's do it.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. It's so nice to be back with you all on my LinkedIn Live on. It's not LinkedIn Live, sorry. It's a live on many platforms, that is YouTube and Facebook as well. So welcome you to this BSB Live, and today I have a very special guest with me. He's very special in many ways, and I'll tell you why. Anupriya Chowdhary is a seasoned human resources professional and a career coach. She has reached out to over 6,000 students and professionals in the last 8 years, training them on leveraging storytelling for growth and interpersonal impact. Her passion for storytelling runs deep as an ardent reader as well as an author. She has authored 6 books, including fiction and non-fiction works. A curator at several events such as TEDx, Pecha Kucha, Calcutta, and several other public speaking platforms. Anupriya has helped around 100 speakers share their best My Story with their audience through local platforms and globally online. Anupriya is a huge propagator of storytelling as an effective tool for some common corporate challenges such as leadership influence, team communication, and conflict resolution. Now, this was her official introduction, but now I want to tell you why she is so special. Normally, when I get guests here, they are more unknown people. Many of them I've just had one conversation before they come here. But Anupriya is not like that. Anupriya and I work very closely together in Professional Speakers Association of India, and on various projects we've done work very closely. And I can tell you, she is such a wonderful human being. She is a person I would love to have in my team, to work with her, to work under her command anytime, because she's such a gem of a person. And that is what is more important than the extreme professional competence that she has. Anupriya, welcome to today's show. And the last part of what I read out in your introduction, and that is when you talk about storytelling as an effective tool for some common corporate challenges, such as leadership influence, we are going to be talking a lot more about business and corporate leaders who need to influence people in their leadership, their teamwork, their communications, and their conflict resolutions. So,
Good evening, sir. Good evening. I'm so glad to be here and looking forward to this discussion.
so good, so good. So, yes. So, let's begin. And guys, let me tell you, all those who have joined in already, we love to hear from you. If you write down in the comments that you are there, we get to know. So, at the moment, I can see Deepak Chadda. Hi, Deepak, how are you? Deepak is a coursemate and a friend who's always there wherever I am, and such a loyal, such a good friend that he's always there wherever I go. Snehal, she's of course member of my team, and very happy to see Snehal around here. Okay, so uh, all those who are here, please also keep sharing your comments as also your questions, because at the end we will try and address those questions. See Dave Buck joining in from USA. Dave Buck is another close friend. We share a common thing, and that is time management. He's just written a book on time management, and he's already got my book, and he's also quoted my book in his book. So that's the type of time management common subject. But more importantly, Dave is also a very good friend. So welcome, Dave. So happy to see you. Dr. Tripti Shelke has joined us. Good evening, Tripti. Very nice to see you. Shriyan Rose. Oh, very good. I can see somebody from Malaysia, and that's very interesting. Thank you very much. So, certainly today, Anupriya has made this an international platform by pulling in people from Malaysia and USA. And I think we're going to have a few more coming from different countries very soon. So let's begin. And Anupriya, let me start by asking you that let's to kick off things. Can you share a brief overview of what storytelling means in the context of leadership influence?
All right. So when we talk about leadership influence, first of all, I think it's very relevant if I elaborated on why storytelling any which way works better. And we are talking here about communication. Uh, that storytelling is a better communication tool because we want to reach out to the person and we want that the sender's message, when it is sent, it gets decoded by the receiver in the same manner as the sender. All right, so there is enough research that says that storytelling helps mirror the teller's the neurological activity in the receiver's neurological activity. And that kind of experiment and all the science behind amygdala and the neurosciences, that research that says that, storytelling is a better communication tool, that established. A leader's primary role is to be able to communicate clearly, be it the vision and mission of the organization or the team, the goals of the team, the motivations of the team, the instructions, anything. A leader's primary job is to communicate. And when storytelling is such a powerful tool for communication, obviously, uh, a leader ought to have this tool as an arm and ammunition, because I'm sitting with a brigadier. I think I'll use this terminology. So, the arms and ammunitions, if it is the most effective arm and ammunition for communication, it is only logical that leaders are adept at this tool, at using this. So,
I agree with you. Yeah, absolutely. Um, Anupriya, can you share some examples of leaders, preferably in the Indian context, who have effectively used storytelling to inspire and lead?
I think my idol is Indira Nui. And I always talk about this example that she, as a leader, has always been extremely vocal about her vulnerabilities, about balancing her work and life. And I always say that had it not been for her sharing her vulnerabilities, sharing her challenges as a mother, uh, if she weren't talking about those stories, I don't think uh, mothers like me would have the courage to, who do not have the courage to leave their kids full time at home and go out for a full time job. We would even have a courage to start a second inning. So, Indira Nui is one perfect example. She has never shied away from sharing anecdotes and instances from her personal life, turned them into an interview, turned them into a speech, and shared with the audience. The other person that I do recall of right now is Sudha Murthy. Now, Sudha Murthy is not a business person, so to say, but she is the primary stakeholder in one of the biggest success stories that India has, as the founding
Absolutely.
stakeholder.
No,
So, as a
absolutely.
founding stakeholder, when she shares stories about how, as a wife of somebody who left his job to set up a startup, and her own challenges as a mechanical engineer in a in a Tata company, when she shares those stories, They inspire a lot of startup owners, of course. They inspire a lot of aspiring founders, and they aspire women, of course. Matlab, that goes without saying that she's inspiring women, but she's also inspiring students, telling them how to take risks in life. How she took a risk.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Absolutely. I find both these examples are so valid, and both of them they really come out with exceptional influence that they create with their stories. And I remember recently Sudha Murthy had come out with something when, I don't remember what the occasion was, but she was telling us how it is so difficult to be the wife of a VIP type of a person. And she's just giving all the
yes,
disadvantages. And it was so, like you said, sharing vulnerabilities as well as uh, giving out realities of life, which
yes,
actually inspire a lot of people that what happens to them is also natural. It is not something. So I agree with you absolutely. Anupriya, before we go further, I keep seeing this uh, caption on your or your image of your book there, and I was probably one of the first ones who ordered it, and probably one of the readers who read it very soon after I had bought it. I normally don't read books; they keep lying in my pending.
yes. I remember you clicking a picture of you reading that on a flight and sharing that with me.
Yeah, yeah,
So
I was reading because
that
I
remains
just got
one of
it.
my treasured, my prized treasures.
So I would certainly like you to share with the viewers that this interesting book that you have written, A to Z workbook, and I really found it was very good because the tools you have used there are very impactful and effective. And it all talks about living the story of your personal brand. So, can you
Yes.
share some of the things that you've written in this book, and also how, and link it to personal brand, that when we are talking about personal brand, how does storytelling help us?
Yes. Uh, I love to talk about this topic because people say, how do you live the story of your personal brand? So that's something that really piques people's interest. And I like to say that personal branding in the modern day in the modern day aspect, people talk about creating a profile, creating a logo, the color code, the scheme, the presence. But what is the foundation beneath that presence? Without the body of work, you really, whatever you could do, if there isn't strong enough foundation, if there is not enough body of work, the brand is going to fall flat. And we always say this, हिंदी में कहावत है एक, ऊंची दुकान फीका पकवान. So आप
Hmm.
कितना भी branding कर लीजिए, how much so ever you may do the branding, if the sweet is not good enough or tasty enough, it is not going to stick around for a very long time. So I always say this. I quote Indranil Chakraborty here in his book. He mentions stories at work that business storytelling is based on facts. And that's my son peeping in because he loves to do that. He likes the feel of him peeping in and going out.
That's
So, so
that's
uh,
perfectly great. Hmm.
yes, COVID told me how to coexist. It taught me, and I've stuck around with that philosophy. And yes, so when Indranil Chakraborty says that, it applies to personal brands also. And in my book, what I have told, I think I'll just excuse myself for a minute. He's overdoing it.
Okay. So yeah. So while she's doing that, I saw some comments, and Srinivas Galyani, one such legendary story is Raghu Raman. Yes, Raghu Raman is really good, and I follow him, and I have a great amount of respect for him. Yeah. So you're back, and let's continue. Yeah.
Yes. So I was talking about this book, and I figured that, the confidence to build up a strong personal brand has to come from that little tidbits that you do on a daily basis to build up your brand, to build up that foundation. And then the next step is, are you able to project those things, project that body of work in the right manner? So in this book, I talk about how to create that body of work, how to have that self realization about that body of work, because a lot of times people are so focused on doing things, they're not mindful about they've already created a body of work. I feel I meet so many people who doing some great job and then they're like, I don't have anything to stand up on the stage and talk about. So that is a huge task wherein I say that everyone has a story to tell. If you've been working for 10 years, 15 years, of course you have the body of work. It's only that it's lying around there, diffused in the atmosphere. You now need to gather all the particles and accumulate them into a laddu and then eat the laddu.
Very good. Very good.
Yes. So
You see,
this book covers all the three parts, creating the body of work, creating that laddu of the work, and then how to eat it and project that work to other people, to the stakeholders who need to know your story.
and
So
probably
that's
also
the
how to
whole
digest that
planet I
letter.
talk about.
I said I also think after that you have to talk about how to digest that laddu.
So that the digestion is for the stakeholder, and that's their job. That's not in our control. We really can't. We don't have that in our control. Our locus of control is what we do, what we project.
Absolutely. So I was going to say something on that. Just a minute. Some thought came to my mind. Yeah. So Anupriya, what happened? I decided to go in for my branding. There was one lady, I had met her in one of the workshops, and I had a very, we had done an exercise where you had to sit in front of each other and look into each other's eyes for 1 minute. So when she met me after many years and she said, "Do you remember me?" I said, "I remember every feature on your face because I saw it for 1 minute." So this girl is Arti Narang, and she came to me and she said, "I see some of your work, and I'm into personal branding, and I think you need to do something. Your brand is not showing what you are. I know you, but your work doesn't show you like that." So anyway,
Yes.
I took her offer. She came home and she did something with me, what she called a discovery session. And at one stage, she asked me, "Okay, tell me, what is your main story of your life?" And I said, "I don't have a story." So she said, she said exactly what he said. No, everyone
One has a
has
story.
not only one story but many stories. And she said, if you have served the army for 34 years, how can you not have stories?
Absolutely. I was about
So
to ask you that, that you might have had leaders in the army who use storytelling. So please share that with us.
yeah, I'll tell you that also. Yeah. So you know what happened at the end of the 8 hours? She said something that I'm going to surprise you with. And I said, "What's that?" She said, "I'm going to create something on your website." And she has done that. It's called Candid Chat. And in that Candid Chat, she's talked about how, with a candid chat with me, she had discovered 6 stories of my life, which I had never known were my stories. Because she was asking me
Yes.
questions, and as I was telling her, she was very good at picking up those stories, and then she put them down. And if somebody goes to my website and sees, you'll see 6 stories coming out of a normal conversation. And now I've made a list. I think I got more than 30, 40 stories that I can talk about. And I also almost started doing a podcast. The only first was recorded, and then something happened with the company that was doing my podcast. It stopped doing it, so it is still lying pending. But I have that project still in mind. It's all about army stories, and basically what lessons you can learn from army stories. And when you're talking about, at that point of time when we were in the army, storytelling may have been there right from your childhood when your grandmother told you stories. But
Absolutely.
storytelling was not a subject the way it's talked about today. Storytelling was not in the
Yes.
corporate arena. It was not an. It was, left to just your grandmother and you, and at home, and maybe your books and comics. There was nothing beyond storytelling then. But storytelling as a tool, we have started hearing of it in the last 1 or 2 decades. Before that, I think there was nothing like that.
Yes.
But when you talked of the army leaders, I know of many of my seniors. When I look back now, and said that every time in a conference, in a meeting, in anything, they were telling you old stories. And you know what? We used to always think that they are talking about the customs and traditions of the battalion, how we fought old wars and why. And I realized that those stories of the Second World War, those stories of, let's say, the Chinese aggression, the stories of 65 war with Pakistan, those stories were the ones which were actually inspiring everyone in the battalion to do their best. And
Yes.
if you really talk of somebody who's influenced at a very high level, I would urge everyone to go and watch some videos of Sam Manekshaw. His storytelling is so good. And one particular story which
Yes.
I quite often tell people in my workshops and all is on handling fear. There is a story of Sohan Singh, Sipai Sohan Singh, of how Sipai Sohan Singh had threatened to kill him, and he had given what do you call, pistol to him, he loaded the pistol in front of him and gave it to him and said, "Himmat hai to goli maar mere ko." And he says that, you think I was not scared? He is, I was shitting in my pants, but I was so, and I heard it from his own mouth. On YouTube, he hasn't used these words. He had said something, I was terrified. But when he was telling us, he said, I was shitting in my pants when the revolver was in his hand, that just in. So why he did that? And he said that he tells this story to bring out a lesson that leaders can't show fear, they may have fear. So it's one of the
Yes.
best stories on handling fear. So what Anupriya is telling us, and what I can reinforce, is that if you talk about handling fear, and I can give you a PowerPoint presentation giving you 20 reasons why you should not show fear, but that one story of Sam Manekshaw is going to give you a far more depth in understanding that subject and applying it in
Yes.
your life than just knowing the theory and the base behind it.
Yes. Absolutely.
So,
So the entire science again comes from the fact that, when the speaker is telling a story, there are emotions, there is a setting, and the listener finds himself or herself in the same setting with the same emotions, and they're mirroring the teller's mindset, the neurological activity, and they understand the message. They are bound to understand the message. I like to quote one experiment here. It's a psychology experiment, and it's
hmm,
not related to storytelling. It is about how mirroring works, how the brain activity works. And it is about a class of students who are learning piano, and they had to give their final exam, and they were divided. It's a very famous experiment. They were divided into two groups, and in one group they were given the pianos and they were said practice, and the second group was said imagine that you're practicing what you will play during the exam tomorrow. Imagine practicing that. So when the final performances were evaluated, it was found that there wasn't much difference. The perceived grade, the perceived evaluation of every candidate was somewhere similar to what their previous evaluation said. And the two groups did not differ much in terms of somebody who had practiced with hand or who had just imagined. It was similar. So it is all about how you can stimulate the mind. And that's why I think all these concepts of manifestation and subconscious mind, everything boils down to just one thing. If the mind can think, it can imagine. If the mind can imagine, if it can visualize, it can make it a reality. It functions.
that brings me to a very interesting questions, or not interesting fact. When I came out of the army, I was doing everything about experiential learning, outbound training, and I was always believing and propagating that what you learn through experience, you can never learn through anything else.
Yes.
I came across a young girl who was 22 years old who was conducting a workshop on parenting. And I happened to be in the hall and I attended that workshop. And I was talking to some people on my table. How can a girl of 22 who's not even married talk about parenting? She has no experience, she has no knowledge of what is parenting. Anyway, came the tea break, and I was very curious to ask her. I said, "Tell me one thing. How are you talking about parenting? You are not a parent. How do you know about parenting?" So she said, "Firstly,
Yes.
I am not a parent, but I have parents, and I know how they dealt with me. I have my cousins, my friends. I've seen their parents, the way they have treated their children. So I've learned a lot about what parents do right and wrong. More
Yes.
importantly, I'm a teacher, and in the school, when children come, from their behavior patterns, I pick up a lot of what is going wrong with that child because of parenting or what is going right. So she says, I don't think I have to be a parent to teach parenting. I thought there
Absolutely.
was a point in it, but I was still
Yes.
not too convinced. Then I met a friend of mine who's a film producer and director. And I was telling him the same thing. And he told me something. He says, all of us who produce films, now I have done a film on children, it is on the youth, and it is about education. I have no idea about education. But I've got a whole school depicted there. I've got a principal, teachers, students, and this picture is doing so well. Can't I imagine? Can't I study? Can't I know? So he said the same thing that you said. He said, if you can be vigilant about what's happening around you and you can pick up from people's experiences and put them together,
Yes.
and you have imagination, you don't need to really say that if I don't have experience, I can't teach. And that day
Absolutely.
I got convinced, because yes, when I saw his movie, a person who had zero knowledge about education had produced a beautiful movie. And so many army movies I've seen where people had no knowledge about the army, but they produced good movies about the army. So yes, it is
Yes.
possible.
So that's a different
Yes.
discussion
Yeah.
altogether. I could bring in so many more examples, but I think I'll refrain because the point of this discussion is storytelling for leadership influence.
Yeah. So now let's go further and say that you have said it in the passing, but I want you to say a little more explicitly. What is the science behind why storytelling is so powerful in making an impact on people? So, whether it's a
I
leader
think
or
I've said
anyone,
it,
how do you
mentioned it
impact?
twice. Yeah, it's the same. It's the same thing. It's all about communication. The communication's basic theory says sender, there is a sender, then there is a medium, and then there is a receiver. And the receiver decodes the message. And if the closest the receiver's decoded message is to the sender's message, it makes more impact because they are both looking at the same things. So, stories help mirror the teller's neurological activity, brain activity, and they
Hmm.
get mirrored in the listener's brain activity. And it's closer, and it's all about emotions.
Hmm.
Emotions play a very, very strong part in it. And one of the primary principles of storytelling is you have to, one, make it visual. It has to be visualizable. It has to be easily able to, one has to be able to easily visualize the setting of the story. And two is it has to create some kind of a emotional commotion. Now,
Hmm.
emotional commotion may not always be because I said he's very excited.
Hmm.
Emotions always do not create the emotional commotion. The emotional commotion also comes from the setting. When I say it was a warm, humid, hot, not warm, but hot, humid Calcutta summer afternoon.
Yeah. Okay.
And I felt the beads of sweat behind my ears. And more often than not, you will think about a summer afternoon when you had sweats behind your ears and you will reach out to check those behind your ears. Or you will think, yeah, Bombay also has very hot and humid weather. Calcutta, Bombay, same humid weather. And you are engaged immediately.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah,
you
I've experienced
create
that.
the setting. When you create the setting, or you any kind of setting, and you talk about something which is in a setting which I can visualize, which I can relate with, there is emotional commotion.
Hmm.
And the moment there is emotional commotion, you have your audience attention. Several
Absolutely.
researchers on storytelling, several researchers on communication establish this, that the moment you create that common emotional commotion, the audience is hooked. That's what we call the hook. That's why people start either with a question, because there's commotion, then okay, thought commotion, okay, I know this, I think I can answer this. So the moment you have a hook, so in a story, probably you may not have a question as a hook, but a plain simple fact, like I mentioned, a hot, humid Calcutta summer afternoon, and I'm sweating all over. My shirt is soaked, all my sweat, so I feel a little relieved when I'm under the tree.
Hmm.
The breeze comes in, it helps me relieve some sweat. And you know that feeling. You know that feeling. We know that everyone knows that feeling, except you're somebody who's 24/7 in the AC. I don't
Hmm.
think there's anyone who's never experienced this feeling. The moment you know that there are people who have experienced this feeling and you say this and they're like, yeah, she knows what we feel.
Yeah. Anupriya, last year when we went to for a boot camp, PSCI boot camp to Puri, and we had this Major Muhammad Ali Shah with us. He told us a story, and he was talking about the importance of storytelling, but he did it so well. When he was talking about how he opened the fridge and took out a piece of lemon, and then he said, "I put the lemon in my mouth. Ah, it was so sour." And I'm telling you,
My glands are activated. Yes, my glands
all,
got activated. I could
all
feel
of
that.
us were feeling the
Yes.
sour lemon in our mouth.
I
Actually,
also I also felt that peculiar taste in my tongue right away.
you know.
That
So I
is
think it
that
was
is that is mirroring. That
that
is
is. Oh
mirroring.
yes, yes. And that is one place where I realized that yes, you can create that. And I didn't know this. So this is the first time I've heard about emotional commotion. So I've taken this as a good lesson today. Which also creates an impact that sometimes these are those little things like now emotional commotion is something that's going to remind me of this lesson I've learned from you. Another thing that comes to my mind as we are talking on this, and that is that I did this program with Sam Cawthon, and Sam Cawthon has written a book called The Story Showing, and he says don't tell a story, people don't like being told, show them a story. And he has been demonstrating is very powerful. So he says on the stage a speaker is not just speaking, he's creating an experience. And because you are
Yes.
creating an experience, uh, if you just keep telling, people don't get engaged. But so he's talks about some rules that he told us, that okay, always the right is your future, the left is your past. So when you say long back in 2000, sorry, 19 so and so, and when you say, and when you look at the future, so it's always that you have in your mind those spaces, and the audience starts relating to it. And then
Yes.
he told us, I still remember the first time when he's talking about, and I went up as a volunteer to do what he was saying. So it was something like you telling a story to somebody, that my father and my mother, and the way you had to switch. And the moment you said my father, and you took that place, and took that place and said whatever he told his mother, and then he went there and said what the mother said, and then he came in the center and he said, I told them stop fighting with each other. It was very powerful. So that is another dimension, and that is go beyond just telling a story. So you just now spoke about creating that emotional commotion. I'm also saying if you extend it to showing it in a way that people can now, you actually enhancing their imagination, their visualization.
Exactly.
You're making it
Yes.
easier for them. So what would you
Exactly.
say to this idea of story showing as a little spice for storytelling?
So anything that adds to the visual ability of what you are saying, be it the stage setup, be it the visual aid. Even the visual aid, people believe in putting the text there, it doesn't help. But if you put a graph there or an image there, it will automatically take the imaginability, the visual ability to the next level. And then what you're saying makes much more sense.
Very correct. Very
So there
correct.
was one story, there is one story that I always tell about, my kids playing outside on the road, on the street after a rain.
Hmm.
Now, when I say that, it has just rained, it just stopped raining after 3 days this morning. And the kids, feeling restless, having felt restless for last 3 days, they go out and bask in the sun. And then there are those little puddles.
Hmm.
And imagine what would a child do looking at that puddle? Now tell me, I'm asking you, sir, what do you imagine?
So I'm absolutely imagining jumping into that puddle and
What
enjoying
is
the
the sound that you hear when the child is jumping? What is the sound that you're hearing?
splash of water and
Chapak.
the
When I
huh?
say chapak, the
Ah.
moment I say chapak,
Hmm.
you know that the child has gone and jumped into it. You don't have to say the child has gone jumped into it. And then the
Yeah.
kids go out and then immediately chapak. I
Ah.
don't need to tell you that the child has gone and jumped into that puddle. You know that has happened. Along with that, if I put a picture in my visual aid of a puddle
Hmm.
and just the feet of a child, you have now three dimensions: me speaking, me using the word chapak, your mind, and the picture behind. And it's
Hmm.
complete.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
And
I am so against people using bullet points in their graphs and bullet points in their PowerPoints, because they serve absolutely no purpose other than distracting the listener.
or helping the speaker as cue cards.
Exactly. Which is obviously not showing good for you. चलो आप बोल दो मेरे को जरूरत नहीं है क्यू कार्ड की, but this is, for the audience to be able to understand better. No, it's not helping them, it's distracting them rather from what you're speaking. But the moment you bring in a graph, or rather you create an information which is bite sized, and to show 60%, instead of saying 60%, you show five white figures of which you've colored three red.
Hmm.
The audience who's listening to a business presentation knows 3 out of 5 is 60%. It's done. It's visually aiding. So, using PowerPoints as a visual aid for your story, or rather to create a story rather than using it, yes, one as a cue card and two as a data jargon, a data bank. It doesn't serve the purpose. So the entire purpose of any tool that you use, which may be verbal, body, stage, body language, the pacing of your voice, the pitching of your voice, the pauses that you use, the powerpoints that you use, everything boils down to whether you're making it easy for a person to visualize it.
And what about props? I'm very fond of, if you can
Same.
create
So props is
a
sometimes
visual.
you don't have the props in your hand, right? Sometimes you're able to have the props, but business presentations sometimes not nothing more than one single prop of a glass or a ball or something that you'll be able to have,
Hmm.
right? Then you have to use your body language as a prop.
Yeah, you can actually act it out and
Yes.
describe it in a way that people can really
So
understand.
when you said, left side is the father and right side is the mother, that's a prop. That's a spatial prop that you've created.
Yeah,
When
yeah,
I
and
say that, my neighbor, he was looking down and he shouted, and then I looked up to him. What's wrong with you?
hmm.
Do you imagine the neighbor standing on his balcony or his window on the first or the second or the third floor?
Exactly, yeah,
Enough,
exactly, you
enough
do.
prop, enough prop. If you're not doing theater, if you're not doing a theatrical act in a business presentation, um, any kind of public speaking, stage performance, that is your body is and the stage space and the body is enough prop. I am a strong propagator that your body, your hand gestures and your face, you have enough within yourself to create the visual prop.
Absolutely. So I think let's get back to leadership because that is where we were, and we are
Yes.
slightly probably going to drift away. If we continue with these conversations. Although I was tempted to tell you, and let me fall in for that temptation. There's a friend of mine. She was going for a TEDx talk, and she was to talk to a school uh, about social media. And she was particularly, she's a social media expert, and she was asked to tell the parent that social media is not as bad as, don't tell your children not to use it, tell them to use it properly. Okay. So she's asking me, can you think of something? So I told her, I've got an idea, and use this prop if you can. So I said, you walk onto the stage with a hammer in your hand, and then ask the audience, what do you think this hammer was meant for? What did the designer of the hammer think that this hammer is going to be designed for? So the audience will say driving a nail into the wall or something. They say, but supposing somebody takes this hammer and hits it on somebody's head and kills him, is it the fault of the hammer? So no. So it is the usage of the hammer and not the hammer that's at fault. Same as with social media. It's
Wow,
its
wonderful,
usage.
wonderful metaphor, wonderful metaphor.
So, so she did that, and it really worked very well for her. So if so also sometimes when you're creating a change, I also remember a TEDx talk which I saw where somebody had a half cut orange in her hand, and there was a glass already lying on the rostrum or something. So she just took that glass and took that orange and said, "Tell me, if I squeeze this orange, what will come into the glass?" And as she was saying, she started squeezing it, and people said orange juice. She says, but I don't like orange juice. And I say, I'm squeezing an orange, but I want a lemon juice. Will that happen? People said no. So then she started on that, use what you have, focus on what you have and not what you should have had. So if you have
Yes.
an orange, enjoy the orange juice. Don't
I
say,
remember I remember using matchstick as a prop once.
Hmm.
So we went for a startup funding event for our startup, my husband's startup, and we were to make an elevator pitch. And I stood there with a matchstick. I lighted the matchstick, and I just stood there and I said, "This 1 rupee matchstick is our biggest competitor." And that was the hook to our presentation. So yes,
Oh
props
God.
do play a role. Of course, props play a role. They are effective because again they are adding to the visual ability, and the good, if you're able to use them correctly with the right analogy, I think they create a huge impact.
Okay. So now tell me, Anupriya, are there any particular types of stories that work better in a leadership context? And if so, what are they and why do we do that?
So again, like any tool, you have to first have the goal of the tool. What are you trying to achieve? So if you're trying to achieve executive presence, then the story of me is the biggest tool. You tell your story, probably, design a hero story for yourself, or have a collection of 30, 40 stories wherein you face challenges in your work in the same organization or in the earlier organization, and you tell the story of me. This works very nicely, especially when you're a leader and when you want to create common ground with your team and say, I was once in your place. uh,
Hmm.
for leaders to tell the story of kyunki saas bhi kabhi bahu thi, I think that's the most impactful story to create common ground, to develop that trust, because the leader is being vulnerable that I was also once in your place. And I was also, it's okay to have challenges, it's okay to feel lost, or it's okay if the solution isn't arriving immediately. It happened with me too. So that's one, the story of me. The second story is the story of us, wherein you say that, we are a team. This is what we started with, or an organization for that matter. This is where we started with, and this is how we have progressed. And if we have set this goal for ourselves, What do you think is going to take us there? So
Hmm.
you superimpose the contribution and the impact structure of storytelling there, and you
Hmm.
say, this is the story of us. We have come this far. Are
Hmm.
you ready to go that far? Again, yes, I am using the left and the right side,
Yeah, yeah.
talking about the past and the future.
Yeah.
So that's what is the story of us that the leader needs to tell.
Hmm.
Then there is the next category of story, which is the story of an idea. I remember very clearly reading again in Neil Chakrabarti's book, wherein he said that, there was the sales trainer and he was trying to uh, train his sales team. And he wanted to create an understanding of, how sales work and how the returns work for the person, for the shopkeeper. You're going and selling your product in a distribution channel wherein there are retail shops, and how the retail shop processes the sales. He wanted to teach that. And he created he shared his story, his experience in a story format, that he met a small boy and then he said, how are you, why are you not going to school, and you're here, and how does it benefit you? And he says, I'm okay with this, such a small margin, you're working on a very 0.5% margin, and how does it help you? And he goes on to say that the interest rate is this is the turnaround credit period, and with this credit period I'm able to roll my money 26 times a year.
Hmm.
So a 13% return, if it is a 4.5% return, so 13% return for my annual investment is as good as money lying in the bank. So I want a shorter credit period. I want the money to roll over many times.
Very good. Hmm.
So he told this story. And so much so that I am an absolutely non sales person. And I also understood sales from a shopkeeper's perspective when I read this story.
Yeah.
So this is the story of an idea, that how things are working, how things work. I remember this is one of the first websites that I came across as a teenager, how things work. So if you can tell how things work in the form of a story, they register with people. These,
Absolutely. In fact, I remember. Hello. Yeah.
yes,
Uh, I said I remember in one case, where you were. Sorry. Yeah. That a leader whose team was not prepared to accept a high goal. Everyone said that this he is asking for too much. Itna to ho hi nahi sakta and all that. So he told them of a story which was not a competitor or something similar, because that looks like, that looks like too frontal. In the army we say frontal attack,
yes,
which means it'll be seen as something manipulating. But he gave
yes,
them a very different story where something that was considered impossible became okay, which was easily achieved. And after
yes,
that story, when he said, do you still feel that we can't do it? And about 30% people straight away raised their hands and said, no, I think we can. And that was a little turning point. If 30% people said yes, others started wondering maybe it's possible. So yes,
yes,
I have personally seen the influence of stories in business meetings and all that, and I think they really work. I think we'll take a little pause to see, because a lot of people have commented and we have not paid attention to our audience for some time. So, Anupriya, let me just go through one by one and see if we have any comments on that. So, Sushil Mishra says that as being a storyteller too, the points are truly valid, as in the storytelling is the best tool to communicate and pass the message well. So thank you for agreeing, and I think Sushil, we love to hear from you at some other time about your storytelling, and certainly like to take some lessons from you. Uh, Shreyan says that sometimes your personal brand is created by others who have a perception of you, positive or negative, that may not be you at all. What would be your advice to flip or make corrections to such branding that does not do justice to you or your work? Yes, Anupriya, that's your domain.
okay, yes. So that's where storytelling plays a role. That's precisely where storytelling comes into picture, because if you're telling the right kind of stories, which are based on, again, business storytelling or personal branding storytelling has to be authentic. It has to be based on facts. So there has to be enough incidental evidence. There has to be enough incidental evidence to say, when I say I'm a good storyteller or a speech curator, what evidence do I have to say that? Am I being authentic, or I'm just being, am I being, it's the same like that. If Harsha Bhogle talks about cricket without ever having lifted a bat in the ground, no one questions his authority. But if I were to become a cricket analyst today, people would be like, okay, tell us how many matches have you viewed? What is your technical, what do you know the technical terms? They would like to test me. So if the stories that you are telling, the evidence, that the information that you're projecting is based on incidental evidence, then people see, you're never going to make 100% people happy. But branding comes from a space of authenticity. It has to come from a space wherein people are perceiving what you're projecting. And if you're projecting something, stories based on incidental evidence, then there is no scope that people would be able to perceive you wrong. They may like you, they may not like you, as a different thing. That's a different separate discussion altogether. That are you using the right words? Then it percolate down to a very unitary thing, that are you using the right words? Do these words sound arrogant? Do these words sound humble? So that's, again, that goes into scripting. Then that's the scripting part of it, the micro and the nano view of your script, that some words come across as rude. And that is like the micro level of telling the story. That's the micro activity of telling the story, wherein you're scripting your story. But as long as you're projecting the right information through incidental evidence, uh, I don't think you have to worry about people perceiving you in a wrong manner, because you're out there creating your personal brand to actually establish your capability, your credentials, and your character. And using the right words in the script plays a very, very, very strong role, a very important role in projecting your story with the correct character that you want them to project, you want to project as. So I'll share a very funny incident, Brigadier. So I'm sitting with you. So I've done quite some work with the Army wives in the last 2 years. And what we do is, before we curate the event, we conduct a training session, a small training session, wherein we talk about, again, how to identify your most important story and how to structure it and how to script it. And I used my normal inspirational language that I use with generic my civilian audience. And a lot of army wives, they were like, it sounded very rude to us. Because it's not I was being rude. It was because they are used to a certain pattern and certain use of language and protocol. And I wasn't using that protocol. That was maybe a mistake on my behalf, that I didn't do my research or anything. But then it came across and I thought, Acha, maine kya bola? Matlab, what did I say? And then I went back, I replayed the recording, and I figured points out wherein it was nothing but just words and phrases which I could have been slightly more, different with. I wouldn't say more or less, but I could have been different with, and that would have made all the difference. So, scripting, this brings to me, yes, thank you for that question, because it brings to me to a very important part of storytelling, which is scripting. You think that you have an idea of a story and you will, just go and tell it out. It doesn't work like that. Which words to come first, where to take the pause, where to rise your pace, increase your pace, where to reduce it. All of that plays a very important role in creating the right impact for your story. Your story has to be scripted with the screenplay. So I remember Brigadier Sir right now doing, she came up with a lemon and she squeezed the orange and said, I want a lemon juice. Would that happen? So, had it not been done in the right way on the stage, the script and the screenplay were not right, it would not create the same level of impact. So, like props are important, visual aids are important, scripting plays a very important role. So
Yes.
I work with an army wife, and if we have time, I'd like to elaborate on this, tell this incident. So this female, she's 4'8", and she has been a victim of body shaming all her life and all of that. And then she wanted to tell that story in front of the stage, and she said, "Maine kaha, acha, then how did you find this guy? She's married to a soldier who's 6 feet 2 inches." So that kind of difference in the height. And she said that when they were dating and all, and he proposed, and she said that, how will we go along, that the society is going to judge us, and how will hamari kaise nibhegi. And he said, tu mere dil tak aa jati hai, kafi hai.
Wow.
We've worked further on it. We worked further on the script, and we said that the final presentation came in as, um, उसने मुझे उसने मुझे अपने पास खींचा और उसने कहा, देख तू मेरे दिल तक आ जाती है, मेरे दिल की धड़कन सुनते रहना, बस.
Wow.
So, scripting again plays a very important role, be it public speaking, speeches, storytelling for public speaking, be it storytelling in a boardroom, be it storytelling in day to day work life for a team. The messages, the communication has to be scripted, it cannot be random.
Okay. So let's go further to few more comments. So here is Raj Datta. He's a naval officer. I know him. So he's saying, agree, ma'am. Everyone's life is epic, wanting to be revealed to the world. I, on my part, have been writing a few blogs on senior veterans. Yeah, I know that. So thank you, Raj. And he also says to name a few: Commodore I.J. Sharma and Veer Chakra, Commodore S.K. Bhalla, Rear Admiral Thukural, and all that. Okay, fine. Uh, then we have, of course, Akshata, who's a very good follower of mine. She comes for all my LinkedIn lives, Instagram lives. She's a student in Pune. Thank you for being here, Akshata. Uh, Interesting talk, Brigadier Sir. A lot to learn from Anupriya ma'am. So that's a compliment, Anupriya. Uh,
Thank you so much.
Imagine visualization helps a lot. Yes, it does. Uh, Thank you, Anupriya, for sharing that tip, making your stories visual, emotional commotion. Okay, good. Uh, Once you have a story, how to start it to latch on to audience attention and hypnotize them by your delivery. What goes on in your pre-preparation? That's a good question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so Raj, as I said, the script and the screenplay, and that's how you visualize how the story will pan out and how to start it to latch on. So there's a whole lot of homework. There's a first card, second card, editing. Like Steve Jobs, I love to edit my scripts for at least 10 to 15 times. Brigadier Sir knows that the kind of editing I put the speeches through. And to latch on to audience attention, as you mentioned, you made a mention in the comment, create an emotional commotion. That is the strongest hook. So I remember Brigadier Sir mentioning in one of his speeches, he started with the question, if you were to be hit by a bullet in your head, what would you do? And then he followed with the story. When you have this kind of a question which says bullet hits your head, the emotional commotion has started. There is emotional commotion. Some are thinking, I would not live only, what will I do? Some are thinking, what is he trying to tell us? I don't think I will live only. So, in different degrees, people are questioning themselves. They're questioning their own reactions, and they're questioning, why has this person asked such a question?
And what is it going to do about it now? How is it going forward?
Yeah, how is it going to pan out? So, that's the hook. So that's the latching part. And then hypnotizing is what we've discussed through this session. So the first thing is you script it well. Second thing is, how do you script it well? By story showing. You use the right props, the right use of stage, the right use of body language, uh, the the entire screenplay has to be in front of you, or rather you have to practice it one step after another step and see what will be the more impactful way of putting it out, putting the message out. Like I use this example of this young girl who said कि उसने कहा मेरे दिल की धड़कन सुनते रहना बस,
Hmm.
काफी है या फिर बस, which word is more impactful? So we took a little poll, of three, four of us in the room, and we said, what is more impactful? And people had their vote, and she used that. So
Very good.
you have to have feedback also. Feedback is a
So
very important part.
what I'm
Preparation
also
होगी तो feedback होगा.
what I'm gathering now is that you have to play around with words, you have to try different combinations, and you have to also get feedback and see, because you may not really
Yes.
get to know what the audience is going to listen to. Okay. Now
Yes.
there are a lot of comments and we got very little time left. We already overshot. So I will skip the little bit of appreciations and all. Thank you very much for all those who are doing that. But let's come back to a few more questions. Of course, this one is when Raj Datta is talking about a story I've been telling. Um, there's something called hole in the clouds, where a person says that I am the one who created holes in the clouds. It's in one of my talks called Yellow Talks. Okay. Uh, okay, Captain P.S. Mehta, he is here. He is also a great storyteller. I know he's a naval officer. Whether story showing or telling, it will depend on the audience type. Generally, the audience has three types of inferences: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. So I feel we need to play by the ear, showing or and telling. I'll tell you, Pratap, I differ slightly there. The reason is that in any crowd, let's say I know that my audience is salespeople. I know that my audience is students, but in the students also there'll be three different type of people. I have to cater for a little bit of everyone's needs, because it is very difficult for me to identify any one thing that will satisfy everyone. In a crowd like this,
Yes.
it can't. And
I
particularly
also
now when you're talking on TEDx talk or something, you don't even see your audience, you don't even know, because my talk is not to the 100 people sitting in the room. My talk is to millions of people who are going to see it on the YouTube.
yes, yes,
So somewhere you have to also have a common thing. So when I just spoke on my last TEDx talk, which is yet to come on YouTube, it was meant for students and the subject was based on youth. But I made my content relevant to, firstly, not youth in India but youth in the world, so that it is not considered irrelevant by young people in other countries. I also made it relevant to people who deal with youth, whether they were the parents, the teachers, or the employers. With that, now I've widened my horizon. So I have to do this in my preparation part. There's a little tweaking that a speaker always does on the stage based on the feedback. When you see the emotion, you see the response of the audience, you see where they clap or they don't clap, you can do a little bit of tweaking. But I think all
yes,
speakers need to do a lot of preparation before you go on the stage, and that time you don't know the audience as well. Yes, all that
yes,
I do is I try to find out my audience. All that you get to know is that the audience is this range of people. For example, I just spoke to 1100 people in Jamshedpur recently. The audience was from students. So the youngest person there should have been about 11, 12 years, and the oldest person I know was 80. Now imagine that you are speaking to children, students of schools, colleges, teachers of schools, principals of schools,
and
then
parents.
institutions like XLRI, professors, dean of XLRI, and then corporates where every company there was represented by a mix of either the CEO or the MD himself being there, and down to some of the lowest level management guys. When you're talking to an audience like this, what will you think about who's kinesthetic and who's auditory? You can't. So you have to have a general thing. That is the. But I do agree with you that you should be mindful as a speaker, as a trainer, to know that these are the different types of people, and see if you can sort of look at that. Happy to see Arun Chitlangia, a good friend of mine. He's a very, very good trainer. well known in Mumbai as a good trainer. So nice of you to be here. Uh, Story of me, I like the phrase. Yeah, she calls herself my story coach. My story. That is the real phrase. Okay. Now I'll go further and show you. I'll only come to questions now. Agreed and all is fine. Anushri says, so there's Anupriya, there's Anushri. She's also one of my mentees. Thank you for the wonderful session. Anupriya, you're brilliant in responding. That is Pratap saying that. Uh, Raj Datta says, thanks, Anupriya ma'am. Emotion is bang on. Sir, I also have a question. This is Anushri now. I have to do presentation. Does story help me to attract audience towards me? Yes, that's a question for Anupriya. Yeah.
I have to do presentation. Does story help me to attract? The very idea of a story is to be able to hook audience to you. So when you start with a story hook, a very good example of this is my teacher Amin Haq. He uses this example and he shows a video wherein a beggar is sitting and he says, "I am blind. Please give me something." And nobody is paying attention. And then this lady comes in, she turns around the board and she writes something on the board. And she keeps it there back in its place, only turned around now with the new words, and she walks off. And this man, blind man, makes a huge collection that day. And next day he comes, when she comes in, this blind man, he identifies her footsteps and he stops her. "Ma'am, you are the same person who did something yesterday with my board, right?" And she says, "Yes." And he says, "What did you do?" Because suddenly people started paying attention to me. What she had done was she had now written on the board, "It's a beautiful sunny day in London, but I can't see it."
Wow. Yeah, I know the story. Yes.
So the first sentence was, "It's a beautiful, bright, sunny day." So I am a normal person. When I read that, I look around and I say, "Yeah, it's a nice day. I feel happy about it." And then there is this contrast, "But I can't see it." And people are drawn in. So you have to know your audience. That's like for any communication, this goes without saying. You have to know your audience. And then you have to figure out what will cause the emotional commotion. And
Very
once
good.
you know the audience, you know how to create. So creating contrast in storytelling is the easiest way to create commotion. How to do that in short period of time? All right, let me think of an example. I think I gave that example of Brigadier Sir saying, "What would you do if a bullet were to come and hit your head?"
No,
It's
and
a very
also let me tell
pivotal
you,
point.
let me tell
It's a
you,
very
this
pivotal
is
point from the story that follows.
yeah. My own question was this. In fact, I wanted to ask you. See, right from my childhood, people tell me I'm a good storyteller because I've been. But my stories are always long, and there are some very good friends of mine who say, "Yeah, story ठीक है, but थोड़ी कम छोटा छोटा कर इसको बहुत लंबी है." And I get irritated because I feel that unless the story has all those details, मजा ही नहीं आएगा उसका ना charm खत्म हो जाएगा. Story in two lines will not be a story. So, and also when Sam Cawthon was telling us, he told us some formula which I forget, that it must have a place, it must have a time, it must have. So it should look realistic. It should not be that it's not
Yes,
a
that's the
Raja tha ek
setting.
Rani
Yeah,
thi. It
that's
has
the
to be.
setting.
It
Yes.
has to have a setting. Okay. Now, when I was talking to Anupriya and I had this story which she's talking about this bullet coming, and it was all about why army people do what they do and why do they sacrifice their life for others. That was a, and there was a story to it. I've been telling this story on the stage. It has been taking me about 7 to 8 minutes, but now I have to do it for a TEDx talk in 15 minutes, and I can't have my story going for 8 minutes. So I asked her, and she helped me, and we reduced that story from 8 minutes to 3 minutes.
Two and a
And
half
even three
minutes.
minutes, I was wanting to cut it shorter because I wanted to cover some other things. So, yes, that is that is a big challenge. I still have it. I don't think I've really found an answer to it. But Anushri, start looking at that question, that you have to shorten your stories. And what I've really understood and what she said just now is scripting, which means you write and see what, every word, see what can be cut off. And is there
I have
one?
one more. Yes, so I have one more example, with an opening statement, first two statements, and then you can follow on with the story. So I was to submit a speech somewhere, and it'll be scrutinized and turned into a keynote, and 7.5 minutes I had, and I wanted to talk about how life pans out. You can't plan your life, and still you can draw lessons from it. That was the message that I wanted to give. So from, and because I mostly talk about, using your experienced anecdotes as stories. So I started by saying that, get a good life, get a good salary, live a good life. That's what middle class people do. That was I was determined to do. And then I go and fall in love with Ajay, who eats, drinks, and breathes business. Now, that was precisely 20 seconds. I have created contrast over here, that I come from a family or a background where I believed in a job, in a stable job. And now I was stuck in a situation wherein this person believes only in business. So you've created contrast. The moment you create contrast, the emotional commotion will come in, because either there will be people who believe in jobs, and either or there will be people who believe in business. So for both sets you've created commotion, and now they want to listen to the next part of the story, and then I went on to elaborate on my story for next 2-3 minutes. So
So
principles
another
hain, there is a framework, there are principles. The art lies in crafting those principles in a manner that they create impact. वो practice से आता है. That's scripting, and scripting is a result of practice.
So there are two things I have picked up, one from here and one earlier from Anupriya only. One, I've understood commotion, emotion is one thing. Second is scripting. The third thing which I picked up from Anupriya when she was helping me curate my TEDx talk, and she kept asking me for one thing, which I finally did, and that is this: the key message. She said,
Yes.
just keep that. What is your key message? What are you trying to get at? So I wrote down that one sentence, which we also, uh, you know, I think we kept shortening it till it was just a few words and very clear message. And I wrote this in bold letters and put it on my wall right in front, where everything I was relating to is this driving this message or not. And if it's not,
And
let me
sir, that
stop.
reminds me, I'll give you the backstory why I came to believe in this, that you should be able to write your key message in one sentence. So I was working with one of the TEDx speakers at TEDx Chowdhary, and he works on a lot of mythological stories, and he works with a lot of celebrities creating drama and theater and all of that. And he was telling us that producers get hundreds and thousands of scripts every day. A producer's office gets hundreds and thousands of scripts every day. He doesn't go through the entire script. So there is a concept of a log sentence, a log line. They call it a log line. So the office goes through the log line. So every script has to have a log line on the cover page, the title of the story and the log line. And that one line can make or break the chances of that script being picked up by the producer. It's something like the modern day SEO friendly headline of your web page, the meta headline of your web page. That it has to be strong enough and true enough to depict what you're going to speak in your speech. And once you've written that log line for your speech, for your story, you have to stick to it.
Very good. I think so. There are some very, very great insights that are coming out, and even the audience is saying that. So here Rajdatta is saying this. Alka joined recently and she says, great learnings, just joined. Okay. Here is another question that has come from Arun Chitlangia, and he says, is it okay to narrate Raja Rani stories in business environment?
Depends on what are you trying to achieve by telling this story. So if you're talking about human behavior, if you're talking about pure motivation, maybe you can pick up anecdotes from the Akbar ke zamane se and Raja Rani ke kahani. Uh, but they have to have that semblance of reality for people. So mythological stories, fantasy stories, they play an important role. I know a lot of storytellers who use fantasy stories and mythological stories in business environments. These stories are good to plant, to put that seed of a thought. What I have come to realize is when we talk about these stories, they are good to put a seed. So if you're trying to achieve that, that if you know there's a hopeless audience, there's a hopeless team, what would you do? You would talk about the Indian team in 1995 or 97 when people had lost all hope and marred by the controversies and everything. And then there emerges a leader and he puts a team together that starts believing in himself, in themselves. So you can create an Alexander type story or Raja Rani ki us zamane ki kahani to plant that seed, to sow that seed. Sorry, not plant, but sow that seed. But to drive action, people will need a little more than that the fantasy story.
Yeah, I think they need to relate to some real life
Yes.
stories
It
in the
has to be
present
more
stage.
relatable, real, because the ecosystem has changed, the business landscape changes. अब आज अगर हम Nokia की बात करेंगे, it's become a cliched story. If I want to drive innovation, and I say Nokia did not innovate, Nokia did not adapt. Sorry, adapting. If I talk about adaptation today, and I say Nokia did not adapt, so it finished. The market it lost all market share. It's become a cliched story. Today, we want to talk about disruption. Adaptability is not the question today. Today, we want to talk about disruption. So, you also have to understand the business landscape. I meant same catering for all. Yes.
Okay,
Scripting is a
so
yes.
now I think the no, I don't think there are any more questions. Okay, so thank you very much. I want to thank each one of you in the audience who has today taken. I'm happy that we've had more interaction today than we've been having earlier. And there were a lot of good points that came out from the audience. So thank you very much. And please tune in on alternate Wednesdays, which normally are first and third. Is it first and third or second and fourth? Which one is today? Because today we are on the right one.
Third.
Third. Third.
Third.
Yeah. So first and third. So we normally do this on first and third Wednesday, and look out for announcements which we always do on all the platforms. And we certainly like to have more of you joining in and do. And once you've seen it, when you go on to whether you are on LinkedIn or on YouTube or on Facebook, put your comments there so that we can have more interaction. That's the aim. Uh, Thank you very much to the audience, as I said. And now, Anupriya, thank you very much for your time. It has been a very interesting. I have enjoyed the conversation, and you've really been absolutely bang on. You've simplified things, and I'm sure each one of us who were here today are going back with clearer ideas on storytelling than what we had earlier. So, thank you very much.
My pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I have to agree. The audience has been great, coming up with good insights and insightful questions. So, good questions beget good answers. I was able to share a lot of things which might not have crossed my mind to share on this platform, but the questions begetted those answers.
Okay, anyway, so Sushil has come out with some comments on the Raja Rani story. Okay, right. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and let's close today. And looking forward to seeing you uh, on the first Wednesday of November. Thank you, Anupriya. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.